They told us everything was being handled, that the files were sealed for legal reasons, but when senators started asking who Jeffrey Epstein actually trafficked people to, the silence inside that hearing room said more than any classified document ever could. What you're about to hear isn't rumor, it's the uncomfortable truth about what happens when justice, power, and secrecy collide. Because for years the FBI promised transparency. They said we've released what we can. But when pressed on why the public still can't see the full Epstein files, the names, the statements, the missing pages, suddenly every answer was hidden behind court orders and ongoing investigations.
Did you ever tell anyone that?
No.
Okay. Did you ever tell anyone that you knew these summary firings you were undertaking were illegal, likely illegal, and that you would be sued and later deposed? Did you ever tell anyone that?
No firings at the FBI or terminations were done for anything other than justified
Did you ever
cause.
tell anyone that, Mr.
No,
Patel? Why don't you
no
answer my question?
terminations at the FBI were ever done in my tenure for anything other than failing
Did you ever
to
tell
uphold
anyone
their
that,
oath of
Mr. Patel? You willing to
office
answer
or
the
their-
question?
The FBI.
I guess
I
you're
have
not willing to
answered
answer the
it.
question. So let me move on. Let me
Repeatedly.
move on to the Epstein files. You said you're the most transparent FBI director in history, so I'm going to put you to the test. In 2024, you were asked by Glenn Beck about Epstein's Black Book. And you said, he asked, who has Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? And you said, Black Book FBI. And he said, but who? That is, I mean theirs. And you said, oh, that's under the direct control of the director of the FBI. That's what you said. Was that true, Mr. Patel?
I'll rely on you quoting it accurately. I did that a
Was
couple of
it
years
true
ago.
what you represented to Mr. Beck and the president's supporters out there, or were you lying?
No,
Was it true that the Black Book, Epstein's Black Book, was in the possession of the FBI director?
The Black Book was in the possession of the FBI.
Okay, so now that you're the FBI director, you have possession of the Black Book, right?
That index has been released.
So you have Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book?
What is known as Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book has been released by us.
And you released it. And let me follow up on Senator Kennedy's question, because he asked you, and I'll be very precise here. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself? And you said, himself, there's no credible information, none. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And Kennedy, the information we have, again, is limited. And Senator Kennedy said, the answer is no one. And you said, for the information we have. So is it your testimony today that in all the Epstein files, that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked no one to anyone but himself? Is that your testimony, Mr.
I never
Patel?
said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic anyone else.
Did he traffic any young woman to someone other than himself? That was Mr. Kennedy's question,
And I
Senator Kennedy's
said
question.
the information that 3 administrations have had access to
I'm
have
asking
made
you-
determinations that there are no investigative leads that were credible to prosecute and investigate any others. I'm
Well,
specifically
I'm asking
stating
you whether
we
it's
were
your
working on.
testimony today.
Well, you just read
that
it, and I said it 10 minutes ago, so let the record reflect my testimony.
I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding, because there are victims like Virginia Guifer who have testified otherwise, who have said otherwise, and you're telling the American people today that the Epstein list is a single name and it's Jeffrey Epstein. That's what we're to believe?
That's not what I'm saying. That's what you're saying, and
Well,
you
let
can
me-
say
let me
whatever
ask
you
Let
want.
me ask you this. When Todd Blanche went to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, she said, but did I think these guys were coming for that? I really don't. If you met Epstein, there's no way that this cast of characters, of which it's extraordinary, and some are in your cabinet, who you value as your co-workers, and you know would be with him if he was a creep or because they wanted sexual favors. A man wants sexual favors, he will find that. They didn't have to come to Epstein for that. And the next question Todd Blanche, the president's former criminal defense lawyer, asked is not who in the cabinet, who are you referring to? His question is, so when's the last time you think you were with Mr. Epstein when he got a massage? So let me ask you, who are those cabinet members that Ghislaine Maxwell was referring to that that were part of this cast of characters associated with Mr. Epstein? Who are they?
The Deputy Attorney General took the aggressive step that no one else did and interviewed Miss Maxwell for
I'm
2
asking you,
days,
who are
and we released
who are
the
the cabinet
entirety
members?
of that
Who are the cabinet
transcript.
members?
I do not have that transcript in front of me. You're picking it piecemeal. The American
And-
public can read the entirety of
Let me ask
that.
you one last question, because you clearly won't tell us the cabinet members associated with Mr. Epstein. Let me ask you one last question. And that is, right after she gives
Convenient, right? Think about that. A man accused of running one of the most powerful trafficking networks in modern history, connected to CEOs, royals, bankers, and politicians, and somehow the only name that officially matters is his. That's not closure. That's containment. And for survivors who risked everything to testify, it feels like betrayal all over again. But that wasn't the whole story. The latest Senate hearing turned into a pressure cooker, one that no amount of legal jargon could cool down. Lawmakers demanded clarity, asking direct questions that the FBI director danced around like landmines. When they asked, did Epstein traffic anyone other than himself, he repeated the same phrase, the information we have is limited. Limited? After decades of investigations, photos, interviews, and files stacked taller than the Capitol itself, that's what transparency looks like now. A word used to hide more than it reveals. And here's where things take a darker turn. Years before that testimony, the same man claimed publicly that the FBI possessed Epstein's infamous Black Book, and that it was under his direct control. That's a heavy promise. Fast forward to today, and the answer changes. We released the index. The index? Imagine being told you'd see the full movie, only to get the credits. That's not openness, that's optics. But why does it matter? Because this isn't just about curiosity, it's about accountability, and who's exempt from it. Behind those sealed pages lie questions that go far beyond one criminal. Questions about who enabled him, who visited his homes, who ignored complaints, who took favors, and who made sure those details never reached daylight. When the system can decide which truths the public deserves to see, it stops being justice, it becomes damage control. And that's where the law itself becomes a shield. You've probably heard phrases like grand jury secrecy, Rule 6E, or classified exhibits. They sound procedural, neutral, but they're also the locks that keep certain truths buried. In reality, the Epstein files aren't just one folder sitting in a cabinet. They're a web of categories. Grand jury testimony, FBI 302 witness statements, search warrant returns, financial logs, digital evidence, photos and videos, each one wrapped in a different legal rule, each one requiring a judge's signature to open. And here's the catch. Many of those rules were written to protect victims, not to shield institutions. Grand jury records are sealed to preserve privacy. Photos and digital evidence stay hidden because releasing them could re-traumatize survivors. Those are legitimate reasons. But the problem comes when those same walls are used to protect the powerful instead. That's how protecting privacy quietly turns into protecting reputations. So is there a way to tell the truth without causing more harm? Yes, but it requires courage and paperwork. The FBI and DOJ could file motions asking judges to unseal redacted versions of the files, protecting personal details while exposing the larger network. Congress could demand a secure bipartisan review, where both parties examine the evidence behind closed doors, under oath. But those moves come with political risk, and so far no one seems willing to take it. Meanwhile, survivors wait. Imagine being one of them, watching politicians argue about transparency while the people who hurt you remain unnamed. Every redaction becomes another reminder that your pain is a footnote. Releasing materials without care can destroy lives. But keeping them sealed forever, that destroys trust. Survivor-centered transparency isn't complicated. Notify victims before release, allow them input on what's shared, blur or remove identifying details, and provide mental health support when their cases go public again. That's compassion and accountability working together. But instead, we've built a system where victims are spectators in their own fight for justice. And if you're wondering what Congress can actually do about it, here's the reality. They have the tools: subpoenas, motions to compel, inspector general referrals, classified briefings. They could demand that the FBI produce a timeline of what's been reviewed, what's been withheld, and why. They could require documentation showing which protective orders exist and which could be lifted. But talk is easier than action. Oversight without enforcement is theater. You can't claim to hunt the truth if you never leave the stage. What this boils down to is one question: who benefits from silence? Because make no mistake, silence has value. For those whose names appear in those files, silence buys time, reputation, and distance. For institutions, it buys protection from lawsuits, embarrassment, and public outrage. And for politicians, it buys leverage, the ability to hint at secrets they never intend to reveal. In that equation, survivors lose every time. And let's be honest, Epstein's network of influence was never just about individuals. It was about access, to money, to power, to immunity. That's why this story keeps resurfacing. Every time new information surfaces, someone powerful flinches. Because this case isn't just about what Epstein did, it's about who let him do it. When government agencies say we released everything we could, but can't show the legal steps they took to make that happen, that's not transparency, that's narrative control. Real openness means showing the motions filed, the rulings made, and the specific laws that blocked further disclosure. Anything less is just public relations. And here's the irony: if they actually showed the process, public anger would probably cool down. People don't expect miracles, they expect proof of effort. Even a simple log saying here's what we asked the court, here's what was denied, would do more for trust than another press conference about how complicated it all is. But instead, every unanswered question feeds a new rumor, every redacted name becomes a symbol, and when the truth hides too long, speculation fills the vacuum. That's why this case, years after Epstein's death and Maxwell's conviction, still dominates headlines. Because it's not just a scandal, it's a mirror reflecting how far institutions will go to protect themselves. Think about what Patel said near the end of that hearing. He insisted he was protecting the country and accused his critics of turning justice into theater. Maybe that's true, or maybe that's exactly the problem: power defining its own accountability. Because the moment we accept that explanation without evidence, the concept of oversight dies. So where does that leave the public? It leaves us with a choice. Do we settle for the illusion of transparency, a few redacted pages, a few talking points, or do we demand a documented path toward truth? Real oversight doesn't mean leaking files online, it means building a legal process that respects victims and exposes wrongdoing. Congress can do that, courts can approve it, but it takes citizens demanding it. If you want to know what that process could look like, it's simpler than you think. Judges can authorize partial unsealing. Congress can request a classified review. The DOJ can propose redaction frameworks that safeguard victims, but reveal names of public officials or entities that participated knowingly. None of that breaks the law. It just requires intention. And the irony is, survivors have been asking for this all along. Not vengeance, just validation. To know that their pain mattered enough to make the truth public. To see systems that once ignored them, finally put in the same energy to expose their abusers as they did to silence their stories. This isn't just an Epstein issue, it's a justice issue, a cultural one. Because when laws designed to protect victims become tools to bury evidence, it tells every future survivor the same thing: your trauma is negotiable. But it doesn't have to stay that way. The path forward is clear. Congress must push for a survivor-first release policy. The DOJ must prove it filed motions to unseal where legally possible, and the FBI must show not just the documents it's released, but the steps it took to release them. Transparency isn't about exposure, it's about accountability, and accountability in this case means receipts. The survivors deserve that, the public deserves that, and every taxpayer who funds these investigations deserves that. Because what's hiding in those files isn't just evidence of crimes, it's evidence of how power operates, how systems bend when influence enters the room, how rules get rewritten when reputations are on the line. And that brings us to the question at the heart of it all: can America handle the full truth? Maybe not all at once, but step by step, file by file, name by name. Yes, the truth doesn't have to come as chaos, it can come as healing. As proof that justice still works when we demand it loudly enough. The real danger isn't in knowing too much, it's in settling for too little. So if you care about the survivors, about transparency, about rebuilding faith in the system, don't scroll past this, share it, talk about it. Ask questions that make people uncomfortable. because silence only protects the guilty. And if you're still here, still watching, that means you care. So here's what you can do right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because in our next video we're breaking down exactly how Congress can request those court filings, the motions, the redactions, the judge's orders, that can finally bring sunlight to one of the darkest stories in modern America. This fight isn't about conspiracy, it's about proof, it's about people, and it's about a system that will only stay silent if we let it. So hit like, subscribe and stay tuned, because the truth is closer than they want you to believe. And when it finally comes out, it won't just expose a case, it'll expose a system.